I stated earlier that the records that you're looking at are based on the record that you're viewing. For example, if I'm in sample records addresses, this particular record flows from left to right as far as the different screens are concerned. So if I'm in property and I move to owner, which I'm in now, this property that came over from the property screen shows in the owner. And if I go by and click past the owner and I go to the tenant screen, which I'm going to do now because we're going to cover the tenant screen, you'll see that the tenant screen also carries the same information from the property and owner screens. So if you look at the top, you can see that it comes all the way across to all the different screens. So there's a relationship, and that's actually what it's called, between the different screens. Now, the top does not have to be edited because the information that's there, unless it needs to be updated, should be correct anytime you're looking at the property. Unless somebody has picked up the property and moved it down the street, which is not very likely. Okay, there also is a list view, as we covered before. The list view for this particular property shows the individual properties that are in the tenant listing, account listing. And in this particular case, the tenant name will be in here and the contract date of the date that they actually took the property as far as a lease or rental. You can see that I've got the samples also here that are available, so you can see when they contracted. And if I continued on with what I was doing here, you'd see the rest of the information for rented property or something that is actually leased and the contract. Now understand that as property is re-leased or re-rented, the date field becomes important because that date indicates the date that the property was under contract. If there's a new same property record in here and it's got a newer contract date, that is the current tenant. They should stack in here together. Now, if you wanted to do a find in here and look for a particular property or tenant, what you would do is you would click the find mode, which will empty everything out, and then you can put in something that pertains to the property. In this case, if I put sample, they're all going to show up. So let's do something that's not going to show up. Let's put in, I don't know, I think I can put S, which is just something to look for, and do the find, and you'll notice that it says sample tenant. Now, the other records did not have anybody in there, and what I was trying to show you was you don't have to put the whole thing in. You can put as much information as is required, that if you know that that's all it needs to find the client that you're looking for, who is the tenant, you would be able to find them. And if you're looking at the records or you can't find them because there's so many entries, you can use a combination of fields. Like, for example, if you wanted to use an address or a street that was a well-known part of the address, then that kind of information would come up. So, for example, if this was 123 Crescent Street and you knew you were looking for the Crescent Street address, you could have done the find and just put Crescent in there, and then any properties on Crescent would show up, especially if there's multiple units, apartments 1 through the number, or whatever kind of unit that it might be. So that way you could see all of the units within a certain location. Now, it would not be important at that time to look at the contract date unless the contract is run out. And how would you find that out? Well, you can click on this to bring you back into where we were at in the tenant record. And the tenant record information is here in the portal. And we're going to cover that in a second, but what I want to cover first is that the particular information and the tenant table that we looked at over here actually provides a little bit more information as far as the contract date, which is a critical item as far as looking at property and knowing when it was leased or when it was not. Here's the time, the tenant's name, and this is actually very important also. The one field with the red ring around it, you have to type in the tenant name. Now what happens is each one of these new lines is a new tenant. So for the term of that particular rental or lease, either be it day to day, a week, 6 months, a year, there would be a new record for that time period for the person that actually came in. They would have the information as much as you can put in there as far as first of all, the person who is renting it, the date they were interviewed, or in a case of a tenant that's going to be in there under a contract, you're going to want to have an interview with them, and that would be the interview. Now, if this is a day-to-day rental, this would be not so much an interview as a call where you actually accepted a reservation, And then that reservation information would be either a vacation rental or a lease or whatever it might be as far as what would be in here. The information for the tenant address. Now this is getting a little interesting. This would be the tenant information as far as who is going to be in the property, but this is their last tenant address. And you'll find out why that's important. And it also works for the same thing for a property person that is coming in to rent for a week or whatever. Tenant city, wherever the people are coming from, the state, their zip code, and their telephone number. This is information that you would use for managing the clients themselves. You also have a tenant cell phone. If it's a company that they're coming in with and they want to give you their company information because that's how it's going to be billed, you would put that in here. The tenant ID you do not put in there. You do not change this. The employee start date, or were they actually a tenant where they're going to stay for a period of time, you're going to want to know a little bit more about them. How long have they been employed and when did they start? What is their employee monthly net to see if they can afford the property that you're actually bringing them to, and also give you an idea what kind of properties you can show them. A employee telephone number. This is for the business that if you needed to call for the employer. This is the person that you would call at the employer, the contact that the tenant had given you information on, and the tenant social security number, which is quite important as far as doing a credit analysis on the customer. And I'll go through that now. Property data is actually brought over from the property screen in case you want to review it in front of a client and show them the information about the property, or look through different properties by moving from property screen to property screen to see if you can find the property that matches the person, and as well going back to see if their income supports the actual ownership or rental that they're going to be going through. A credit check is a thing where we provide the credit check for the particular customer to by a company. If you're going to do a credit check, which is highly recommended, these are all live buttons here that will open up different credit corporations so you can take information to see if they have reasonable credit for a lease, rental, or a term type of a situation for your business. Now, as you go through these screens, you're going to notice here that it says do not add new data as far as the tenant is concerned, meaning that you do not type in or add a new record in this screen. And you wouldn't do that anyhow in this record. They do not take new records in the screen because it shows it's got a padlock. But when you go to the first screen and you put it in this tab and you typed it in, it now is a part of a drop-down list. So if you had a tenant moving from one place to another, or renewing a rental, and you were going to do a new contract and start them all over again, you could reselect them and give them a new term and a new contract that is related to the last screen. And or if you wanted to rerun their credit, you could do that again. Then there's the contract itself. The terms and conditions that were in the owner screen that we put in there a little while ago for the property would show up on this screen, and once again the drop-down list. Now what happens is remember we typed in the first person. If they're new and they've never rented or leased or did anything with you before, you would have to add that information as far as that particular address as you add a new tenant. Even for a day, week, or month rental, you want to have that information so that you can back up and have the follow-up information if you need it. Now in this case, we're looking at the contacts, and it is not even a bad idea to have contacts for people that are just going to be a vacation renter, because if you needed to find something or about them or something to get in contact with them and you could not catch them at home, you could use the backup information for their contacts and this is the contract terms, but you can use the backup information to find those people and get in touch with them. So you put the contact information down here that they give you in case you cannot get a hold of them. I can imagine if I was flying all the way from the US to Europe to go to, for example, some island in the middle of the Mediterranean, and people couldn't get a hold of me and they needed to, and they notified somebody who was a friend of mine, I could at least get a hold of my friend and find out why they wanted me and what was the purpose behind that. Now, the contract terminated date, this is the date if you terminate the contract. It can be for terminated for cause, or it can just be a termination period, where the date that they closed out the actual rental or lease. Okay, the contract length has one of those things where you can do a pop-up and you can change the different things in the drop-down list. You can add as many different ones as you need to in that list. You would not change the tenant ID. You don't touch that. And I just keep putting these up on each one of these screens so you're aware of it. You should not be changing the name or trying to change the name in this screen. The only place it can be changed is in the tenant account tab. The last one is the tenant billing. The tenant billing is pretty straightforward, actually. You put the date of any transaction that has to do with the tenant. It can be a deposit, it can be a cleaning fee, it could be a service fee of something where they damage something where you're going to charge them for it. And this would be a running tabulation of anything that was charged to the tenant in the time that they were in their lease, rental, or their weekend or holiday at the particular location. So if you, for example, inspected the premises on let's say a holiday rental, and the dog had messed on the rug and damaged it, there would be a charge for cleaning the rug, and that would be added to their cost as far as that particular term. And the reason you're putting it in here is so that this is backup for the owner who is going to see an expense, but who paid it? It should have been paid by the person that made the mess in this case, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's something where there was a high wind and it blew the door off on the front of the building for some reason. That would be then an expense to that particular tenant's rental, but it would be covered by the owner. So you have to have that kind of information in there. If there's a late fee in this screen, that's rated by the policy of whatever the management company is or the owner. For example, if somebody has an ongoing rental and the due date is for 12/9, for example, here, actually the 9th date of the 12th month, what it is, it's 130 euros, and they paid it. If they did not pay that, you go by whatever your policy is, 10 days late, 5 days late, whatever, to charge them a late fee. Now, if they are doing a rotational type of a payment where it is 1, 5, 7, whatever amount of days it might be, okay, since the last time they paid, the date that the last time that they were due would be calculated. Say, for example, in this case, it's a 30-day rotation. That would automatically calculate the next date that they have a due payment, so that you can create the next line showing the item date, where you can put it in anytime you want to, but the due date is the most important thing here, because that's the date that they need to pay and what the amount is, and if they paid it. And of course, that same information is repeated: the date they paid, the amount they paid, and the amount that's due. If it's 0, that means they paid it. If it has a balance out there, then they haven't paid it. Now, I'm going to be covering these separately. There's a statement that uses this information to provide a statement, and there's also a tenant billing report that you can use to send to the owner of the property or using the management company to track all the payments that were made for whatever issue. Then you have a notes field down here that is used in case this tenant did not pay on time for whatever reason, and this is follow-up notes about who talked to the tenant, how they talked to him as far as making the payments, or did somebody actually talk to him. This would give you that backup information that you're looking at. And also this would sum the late fees down here and the actual total amount that was collected from this particular tenant. If you have any questions about the information on this screen, contact me and I will provide the information and answers that you're looking for. Thank you.